The day everything changed began in the busiest trade port in the region, a place where humans and aliens mixed every single hour of the day. The port was loud, crowded, and colorful, with travelers pulling floating bags behind them, traders shouting out prices, and transport shuttles rising into the sky every few minutes. For most people, it was just another normal morning. For the small human family visiting the port, it was supposed to be a short stop. Before heading back to their home settlement, the family had only come to the port to pick up a package. They did not plan to stay long. Their youngest child, a quiet girl named Mira, loved watching the alien stalls filled with glowing trinkets, bright fabrics, and snacks she had never seen before. Even though she was young, she was curious about everything around her. Every time they came to the port, she held her parents' hand tightly so she wouldn't get lost. This time was no different. It was busy, even more than usual. A trade convoy had arrived earlier that morning, bringing merchants from far-off systems. Many of the alien visitors were taller, stronger, and far more formal than humans were used to. Some moved alone, and others traveled in groups surrounded by guards. Most people were used to seeing them, but visitors from outside the system were not always familiar with human customs. Sometimes misunderstandings happened, but usually they were small and passed quickly. Not that day. Near the center of the port, a checkpoint had been set up for routine scanning of goods. It was run by the Patrol Authority, the group responsible for enforcing rules in the port. Among them was Officer Jarkel, a respected member of their species. Their people were known for strict discipline and following rules exactly as written. Jarkel had served for many years and believed strongly in order and protocol. Some said they were too strict. Some said they never adjusted to working with humans, who were more relaxed and casual. But no one expected the incident that would happen next. Myra and her parent stood near the checkpoint, waiting for the line to move. Mira held a small treat she had been given by a merchant, a glowing candy crystal that changed colors when she moved it. She waved it slowly in the air, watching the colors shift. She was focused on her candy and didn't notice when someone brushed past her. The gentle push made her take a step forward, right toward the boundary line of the checkpoint. Her parent reached to pull her back, but it was too late. She had stepped past the marker. The marker wasn't dangerous. It didn't shock, didn't harm. It was only a glowing strip to show where passengers should stop. But Officer Jarkel reacted instantly, thinking she was running through without permission. They turned sharply, speaking in their own language, which sounded harsh and commanding to human ears. Myra froze, startled by the sudden change in tone. Several travelers nearby looked up. They could sense something was wrong, but it wasn't clear what. People on both sides of the checkpoint paused their movement. Myra's parent quickly stepped forward, raising their hands in a calm, apologetic gesture. They tried to explain that Myra was a child, that she had stepped across by accident, that she was not trying to break any rule. But Jarkel didn't understand human languages well, especially not when spoken quickly. Their species relied more on formal reports and translator pads, not fast conversations. A crowd began forming, not out of panic, but curiosity. Humans tended to gather whenever something seemed unusual. A few aliens watched too, whispering quietly among themselves. Some pulled out holovids, because that was what people did when they thought something interesting might happen. What followed was not a physical fight. Not anything violent or graphic, just a sudden, sharp moment of misunderstanding. Jarkel stepped toward the child, raising a hand in a strict, stop immediately gesture used in their culture. But to humans, especially to a child, that signal looked frightening. Myra flinched and stumbled backward, losing her balance. She didn't fall hard. She simply dropped to the floor with surprise, more startled than hurt. But the motion, the fear on her face, and the raised hand of the officer created a scene that looked far different than what had actually happened. A hush spread through the gathered crowd. No one said anything for the first few seconds. People were trying to understand what they had seen. Jarkel froze too, now realizing the situation did not look good. Their species did not usually interact closely with human children. They did not fully understand how fragile or sensitive humans considered their young, nor how protective humans were toward them. Mira's parents scooped her up quickly, checking if she was all right. She was more shocked than injured, but tears ran down her face simply from the scare. The parent held her close, whispering softly until she calmed down. Around them, whispers grew louder. A human merchant said, "Did that officer just scare the child like that?" Another replied, "I think it was a misunderstanding, but still, that looked bad." A group of alien visitors exchanged uneasy looks. Someone uploaded the holovid within moments. The angle of the video made the situation look far more severe than it had been. It captured the raised arm of the officer, the child falling, and the parent rushing forward. It did not capture the small bump that caused her to step over the line. It did not capture the officer's confusion. Holovids rarely showed the full truth. They showed the most dramatic angle. Within minutes, more people arrived. Security officers stepped between the crowd and Jarkel, unsure of what exactly had happened, but aware enough to understand tensions were rising. They spoke to the parent, listened carefully, and asked Mira gentle questions to make sure she wasn't hurt. They offered medical scans just to be safe, and though Mira nodded fearfully, she seemed to be recovering from the shock. Jarkel stood still, clearly uncomfortable. They attempted to explain themselves through a translator pad, but their voice came out rigid and mechanical. The translator did not capture tone well, making everything sound colder than intended. A human guard approached and said, "This might look worse than it is. But we need to follow procedure." The situation could have ended there. An accident, a misunderstanding, a report filed, and lessons learned. But the holovid spread faster than any official explanation. By the time Mira and her family left the port, believing the situation had been handled, the video had appeared on several news streams. Viewers shared it with shock and anger. Comments poured in within minutes, many asking how a trained officer could frighten a child like that. Others asked if there was a pattern of alien officers being too strict with humans. Some tried to calm the situation, saying people should wait for the official report, but social platforms rarely waited for facts. The most dramatic interpretation spread the fastest at the end of the day. The patrol authority released a short statement calling the event an unfortunate procedural misunderstanding. Many felt the wording was too cold, too formal, and too dismissive. They wanted a clearer apology, a stronger explanation, and reassurance that such incidents would not happen again. Instead, the statement made people feel more frustrated. The incident became the top discussion of the week. News channels debated what should be done. Human leaders asked for a full investigation. Alien officials insisted that Jarkel had not intended harm. But their calm tone only added to the growing tension. And somewhere across the colonies, groups of humans who rarely agreed on anything found themselves suddenly united by one emotion: concern for one small child who had become the center of a much larger issue. This was only the beginning of what would become one of the most significant events in recent interspecies history, an event that would reshape policy, reshape alliances, and reshape how the galaxy viewed humanity. After the incident at the trade port, humans everywhere felt uneasy. Even people who had never met the family or visited that port felt a strange heaviness in their chest. It was not anger alone. There was confusion, too, and a feeling that something deeper had been shaken. The holovid kept circulating. It played again and again on every screen, every public display, every social feed. Even when people tried to ignore it, someone nearby would start talking about it. Did you see what happened? Do you think it was on purpose? Will this change anything? The questions floated from homes to workstations, from cafes to shuttle cabins. Many humans tried to calm each other, reminding themselves and others that not all aliens were strict like Officer Jarkel. That misunderstandings happened, that panic would not help. But deep down, something old inside the human species had awakened, the protective instinct humans carried for their young. It was ancient, strong, and impossible to ignore. On one colony world, a group of teachers gathered in their lounge after school hours. They weren't political experts or security analysts, just normal people who cared about children. They talked softly about what the child in the holovid must have felt, how even a small shock could leave a long-lasting memory. They wondered how the family was doing. Some said they hoped the child would not fear aliens forever. Others said they hoped something good could come out of this situation. On another world, families checked on their own children more than usual. Parents hugged their little ones tighter. Even kids who didn't fully understand what had happened sensed the adults behaving differently. A quiet seriousness filled homes in ways children had never seen before, and they became gentler, staying close to their families. Human leaders, at first, tried to calm the public with promises of proper investigations and fair discussions with alien officials. But humans weren't only waiting for actions from the top. Across every colony, every settlement, every ship, people began talking in their own groups. They shared memories of times they felt misunderstood in alien spaces, or moments when rules felt confusing. Some of these stories were small and harmless, but hearing them one after another made people realize something. A pattern was forming, even if no one had noticed it before. Humans were adaptable. They were patient, friendly, and curious about other species. But they were also firm when it came to the safety of their children. And at this moment, that firmness began gathering like slow-moving clouds before a storm. It wasn't a storm of violence or aggression. It was a storm of unity. People who rarely agreed on anything found themselves sharing the same belief. Something needed to change, and among all the voices rising online and in public spaces, one group listened more carefully than any other: the people of the Terran Asymmetric Intervention Corps. They were not soldiers in the usual sense. They were researchers, guardians, planners, negotiators, and specialists trained to respond when diplomacy alone was not enough. The name sounded intimidating, but most of their work involved peaceful interventions, problem-solving, and preventing misunderstandings before they escalated. They had quiet offices scattered across human territories. Most people never interacted with them, but everyone knew the Corps existed. They listened closely for situations where humans were treated unfairly or where interspecies relations were at risk. Their purpose was not revenge or power. They existed to make sure humans were respected and safe, especially when far from home. When the holovid reached them, they didn't react with loud declarations or rushed decisions. They studied. They replayed the footage from every angle. They gathered background reports. They sent polite requests for information from the port's officials. They checked every detail thoroughly. At first, they wanted to believe it was just a small misunderstanding that would fade once everyone had calmed down. They were used to dealing with exaggerated news. Sometimes social feeds turned minor issues into major conflicts, but a calm explanation fixed everything. They hoped this would be one of those cases, but as they studied deeper, they noticed something troubling. This wasn't the first complaint involving Officer Jarkel. Several previous reports had been filed by both humans and aliens, though none had gained attention. They weren't traumatic incidents, just moments where people felt the officer was too strict, too quick to assume wrongdoing, or too rough with their commands. Most of these complaints had been dismissed as routine misunderstandings. But when collected together, a pattern formed, much like puzzle pieces finally revealing a picture. This made the Corps uneasy. They didn't want to judge an entire species based on one officer, nor did they want to accuse someone unfairly. Their work depended on fairness. But fairness also meant truth, and the truth was that this particular officer had caused confusion many times before, quietly, respectfully, and without alarming the public. The Corps sent a message to the Patrol Authority asking if Jarkel had been placed under temporary review. The answer they received was polite, formal, and disappointing. The authority simply said the officer had followed protocol and that any further evaluation would take time. To the Corps. This response was not comforting. It felt like the situation was being treated as a small mistake when it was clearly a growing concern. On every human world, the reactions continued. Scientists, workers, traders, farmers, engineers, students, people from every background talked about how humans always tried to respect the rules of alien societies, even when those rules were confusing. People questioned whether that respect was always returned. Still, no one wanted a conflict. Humans had worked too hard to build peaceful relations with other species. Most humans respected aliens deeply. Many had alien friends, teachers, neighbors, co-workers. Many alien communities loved living near humans too, appreciating their creativity and kindness. So the discussions were careful, thoughtful, and rooted in concern, not hatred. But underneath all the cautious talk, something undeniable was growing. Humans were preparing, mentally and emotionally, to make sure no child human or alien would ever feel unsafe again in a shared space. They weren't thinking about punishments or anger. They were thinking about protection, clarity, fairness, and accountability. The Corps continued gathering information. They analyzed the officer's background, training, and previous assignments. They sent teams to quietly interview witnesses from the trade port. They studied how the halibut had spread and how public reactions varied across different species. They even reached out to communication experts to understand why this particular moment had created such a strong emotional response. Every piece of information brought them closer to one conclusion. The public would not calm down on its own, not this time. This incident wasn't being seen as an accident. It had become a symbol of something bigger, a symbol of the need for proper boundaries, clearer communication, and respect between species. The Corps knew that if they didn't step in soon, misunderstandings could continue building. People might start assuming the worst about each other, even when no harm was intended. That was how mistrust grew quietly at first, then faster than anyone could predict. They needed to act. Not aggressively, not angrily, but firmly and wisely. So preparations began. Not in dark rooms or underground facilities, but in brightly lit offices and calm discussion halls. Specialists from different divisions sat together and planned how to respond without creating fear or conflict. They wanted to show the galaxy that humans cared deeply for safety, fairness, and the well-being of every child, not only their own. The Corps was preparing to speak for the entire human species. And when humans spoke with a united voice, the entire galaxy usually listened. Meanwhile, on human worlds, life continued, but with a different mood in the air. People worked, studied, shopped, traveled, and gathered with their families. But in every home, every public space, and every workplace, someone would eventually mention the incident. And whenever they did, others would stop what they were doing and listen. The topic felt too important to brush aside. In quiet corners of every settlement, people talked about the future, wondering what steps would come next. They didn't know it yet, but the humans were entering a moment of history that would soon reshape the bond between species across the galaxy. The world didn't know it. But part 2 of the story had already set everything in motion. After weeks of gathering information, interviewing witnesses, and studying every detail of the trade port incident, the Corps finally understood something important. The situation would not resolve on its own. It had become too big, too emotional, and too symbolic. People wanted clarity. They wanted fairness. And most of all, they wanted to feel that the safety of every child, human or alien, was taken seriously. This was not about blame. It was not about anger. It was about responsibility. In a bright office filled with long glass windows, a group of analysts sat around a large circular table. Their screens showed reports, timelines, translations, and communication logs. They weren't tense, but they were deeply focused. Everyone understood the weight of what they were doing. One analyst lifted her tablet and said calmly, "We have gathered information from the trade port's internal recordings." The officer acted quickly because they thought the child was crossing into a restricted area. But there are gaps in their training regarding human children. Another analyst nodded. Yes, their species reacts differently to sudden movements. Their gestures are strict and forceful, but that doesn't mean they intended harm. Still, the reaction frightened the child. A third analyst looked through a stack of reports. "We need to interview the officer. Not publicly, not aggressively, but in a controlled and respectful environment. Only then can we understand their side fully." The team agreed. They wanted truth, not revenge. The Corps had always stood for balance, fairness, and careful thought. They didn't want to make the officer a villain. They only wanted transparency. But that was easier said than done. Officer Jarkel had been placed under what the patrol authority called administrative protection, which essentially meant they were kept at a secure facility while the investigation continued. The authority said this was to prevent misunderstandings with the public, but in reality, it also made it harder for the Corps to reach the officer. Still, humans were known for their persistence. When they believed something needed to be done, they did not stop halfway. A communication specialist from the Corps tried sending polite requests for an independent interview with Jarkel. Each time, the response was the same. "Our internal review must be completed first." The words were formal and respectful, but gave no real permission. The Corps did not want to push too strongly, because pushing too hard could make the alien authorities defensive. So they tried another approach. They contacted neutral mediators, respected individuals from peaceful species who understood both human and alien customs. These mediators agreed to help arrange a private meeting with Jarkel. While this planning happened quietly, the human population continued watching the situation closely. People did not know the details of the Corps' internal work, but they trusted the Corps to act wisely. Every time a new update appeared on communication channels, people paused what they were doing to read it. Even small statements received huge attention. Families talked about it during dinner. Workers discussed it during breaks. Students debated it in classrooms. It had become more than a single incident. It had become a moment of reflection for humanity. People asked themselves what they expected from interspecies alliances, what protections were necessary, and how to ensure fairness without creating conflict. Back in the Corps, preparations for the interview continued. A group of field specialists, not soldiers, but calm and well-trained communicators, prepared to visit the facility where Jarkel was being held. Their purpose was simple: talk, listen, understand. They carried no weapons, no threats, and no hostility. They carried only documents, translators, and a commitment to uncovering truth. Before leaving, they were briefed carefully. "This is not a confrontation," one director told them. "We approach with respect. We ask questions gently. We stay calm if the officer feels confused or defensive. Remember, they experienced the incident too, and they may also feel misunderstood." The specialists nodded. They understood their responsibility. They weren't just representing the Corps. They were representing every human. Meanwhile, in the secure alien facility, Jarkel sat in a quiet room. They were not mistreated. The room had soft lights, a resting corner, clean water, and food suited to their species. But emotionally, the officer felt isolated. They had never expected their actions, even if unintended, to become the center of a galactic discussion. To them, the incident replayed in their mind again and again. The child's frightened reaction had stayed with them. Their species did not raise young in the same way humans did, so they were not used to how sensitive human children could be. Every time Jarkel thought about it, they felt a growing sense of discomfort. When the neutral mediators informed Jarkel that a human team wanted to speak with them, not to attack, not to accuse, but to understand, they hesitated at first. They feared the humans would judge them harshly. But when the mediators assured them that the meeting was to clarify the truth and avoid future misunderstandings, Jarkel finally agreed. As the Corps shuttle approached the facility, the atmosphere inside the cabin was steady and calm. The specialists reviewed their notes, discussed question strategies, and practiced polite greetings in the officers' language. They wanted every part of the meeting to be smooth. The facility entrance was guarded by alien officers, who were polite but cautious. They checked identification, confirmed permissions, and scanned the team's equipment. When everything was approved, they led the Corps specialists to the meeting hall. Jarkel entered a moment later, surrounded by 2 supervisors. The officer looked nervous, but tried to maintain composure. The human specialists greeted them warmly, bowing slightly in respect to the customs of the officer's species. Jarkel seemed surprised, even relieved, at the friendliness. The meeting began slowly. A specialist said gently, "We are here to understand what happened. We know it was not intentional. We want to learn from this moment." The officer listened carefully. Through the translator, they explained their perspective. They described how the sudden movement had triggered an instinctive response based on their training. They explained that the raised hand gesture was meant to signal stop, not to frighten. They also admitted they had little experience interacting with children from other species. As the officer spoke, the human specialists realized something important. Jarkel was not an unkind individual. They were highly disciplined, extremely rule-focused, and deeply unfamiliar with human emotional behavior. The misunderstanding had come from cultural differences, different instincts, and gaps in training. The meeting lasted several hours. The conversation went through every detail: what Jarkel saw, what they thought the child was doing, how they reacted, and why. The humans listened patiently, and without judgment. By the end, both sides felt more relaxed. One specialist said softly, "We appreciate your honesty. We do not want this to turn into a conflict. We only want to ensure safety for everyone, including officers like you." Jarkel nodded slowly. "I understand. I did not realize how my actions appeared to humans. I regret the confusion." It was the closest thing to an apology the officer's culture allowed, and the humans accepted it with grace. When the Corps specialists left the facility that evening, they didn't feel triumphant. They felt thoughtful. They had more understanding, more clarity, and more pieces of the puzzle. But they also knew something else. The public needed to hear the full truth, not just the Holovid's dramatic angle. Humans deserved clarity, and the officer deserved fairness. The Corps returned to their main office and began preparing their report, a report that would later be presented to the Galactic Council. But that moment was still ahead. For now, they focused on gathering every detail with care. Part 3 closed with a subdued, steady determination, humans and aliens both wanting solutions, learning from each other, moving one step closer to a peaceful breakthrough. People could feel something was about to happen, even though no one knew exactly what. News channels talked about the investigation nonstop. Social feeds overflowed with opinions, messages of support, and calls for clarity. Every human, no matter their job, their age, or their location, seemed to be waiting for the next step. In the Terran Asymmetric Intervention Corps' headquarters, The atmosphere was focused but calm. After meeting with Officer Jarkel and collecting every piece of information, the Corps had reached a point where they had to take the matter to a higher level, the Galactic Council. The Council was made up of representatives from dozens of species, each with different personalities, cultures, and expectations. It wasn't an easy place to speak, especially when emotions were high, but it was the only place where a true, fair resolution could be found. Human representatives prepared themselves carefully. They didn't want to create fear or tension. They wanted to show that humans valued peace, respect, and cooperation, but also fairness and accountability. For the Corps, this wasn't about blaming a single officer. It was about improving understanding between all species to prevent future incidents. They created a large report that included A. Full explanation of the Tradeport event, internal recordings from multiple angles, cultural notes explaining human-child behavior, notes about the officer's training, interviews with witnesses, the officer's own explanation of what happened, a list of suggested improvements for interspecies child safety, plans for joint training programs, not punishments. Every part of the report aimed at building trust, not creating division. When the report was ready, the human delegation traveled to the Galactic Council headquarters. The building was enormous, shaped like a spiraling tower that glittered under the soft lights of the planet's surface. Every species had designed a piece of the structure, making it a symbol of unity, a place where cultures blended rather than clashed. Inside, delegates walked through wide halls lined with shimmering displays, showing peaceful moments from different worlds, children playing, communities celebrating, families sharing meals. The displays were meant to remind everyone why diplomacy mattered, to protect lives, futures, and connections. The human delegation walked with steady steps. They were not nervous, but they understood the heaviness of the moment. They were carrying not only documents, but the hopes of billions who wanted reassurance that misunderstandings between species could be handled safely. When they entered the main council chamber, dozens of representatives were already seated. Some looked curious, others concerned, and a few cautious. Word of the human report had already circulated. Some species feared the humans would demand harsh punishments. Others worried about rising tensions. But most simply hoped for a peaceful explanation. The chamber was arranged in a circular layout, with each species facing one another equally. The humans took their place at their designated seat. Their main representative, a calm and thoughtful individual who had served in diplomacy for many years, stepped forward carrying a sealed crystal case. It wasn't a weapon or a threat or anything dangerous, but it held something symbolic, something the humans wanted the council to fully understand. Before the meeting officially began, murmurs floated through the chamber. Some whispered questions. Others exchanged glances. But as soon as the council leader tapped the platform to announce the session, the room fell silent. The human representative began speaking in a steady and respectful tone. "We are here today," they said, "not to create conflict, but to bring clarity. The incident at the trade port has caused deep concern among our people, not because we believe harm was intended, but because we believe better understanding and clearer protections are needed for all young individuals across every species." The room remained quiet. Many representatives leaned forward, listening closely. The human representative continued. "Our investigation shows that cultural differences and gaps in training led to the misunderstanding. The officer involved acted according to their instincts and training, not with harmful intent. We acknowledge that." A soft wave of relief spread through the chamber. Some aliens who had feared accusations now relaxed. But, the human representative said gently, "The event has revealed something important. We need shared rules, shared training, shared understanding. Our children, regardless of species, must feel safe when traveling between worlds. As they spoke, they opened the crystal case. Inside was not anything frightening. It was a teaching symbol, an object shaped like a small globe of light, floating gently and glowing softly. It represented unity, childhood, and shared responsibility. On human worlds, it was called a promise sphere, often used in schools when groups of children made pledges to treat one another kindly. The humans placed the sphere on the council platform, letting it shine brightly for everyone to see. "This is the message we bring," the human representative said. "A promise of protection, a promise of respect, and a promise that we will work together to prevent such misunderstandings from happening again." The gesture surprised many species. They had expected a demand for punishment. Instead, humans were offering unity and cooperation. The human representative continued, "We have created a list of proposed improvements. These include cross-cultural training for officers, child safety awareness across species, clearer checkpoint procedures, and communication tools that help bridge language differences." One representative from a peaceful water-based species said softly, "This is a wise proposal. It focuses on growth, not blame." Another representative from a desert world added, "We appreciate the clarity shown by the humans. This approach strengthens the trust between us." Even the representatives from Jarkel's species nodded slowly. They understood the message clearly. Humans were firm but fair. The council leader spoke next, addressing the humans directly. "Your actions today show great restraint and maturity. You bring not anger, but solutions. The council respects this deeply." Another representative asked, "And what of the officer involved? What is your request regarding them?" The human representative replied calmly, "We do not seek punishment beyond what your species believes is appropriate. We only request that the officer receives additional training so they can better understand human children. We want them to feel prepared, not afraid, when working with other species." The entire chamber seemed surprised. It was rare for a species to show such patience in the face of public unrest. But humans knew that fairness mattered more than revenge. They also understood that building strong relationships required humility. Even in difficult moments, Jarkel's own representatives stood to speak. Their voice was formal but respectful. "We acknowledge our officers' lack of preparation for interspecies child behavior. We accept your request for additional training. We also appreciate your willingness to understand our perspective." The human representative bowed slightly. "We believe understanding comes from listening, and we have listened." The council leader then announced a short break before the voting session. During this pause, many representatives approached the humans privately. Some offered words of appreciation. Others asked questions about the investigation. A few even shared their own concerns about interspecies interactions. Despite their different backgrounds, they all agreed on one thing: children should be safe everywhere, no matter their species. When the council resumed, the vote took place. Species after species agreed to adopt the human proposal. They supported new training programs, new rules, and new protective guidelines. The decision passed with overwhelming approval. As the session ended, the humans didn't celebrate loudly. They simply felt relieved. They had carried the weight of their people's concerns and managed to turn that weight into something constructive, something that would help not only human children, but children of every species. Outside the council hall, the sky glowed a calm shade of blue. The humans stood for a moment, looking out at the peaceful city surrounding them. They knew the public back home would soon hear the news, and they hoped people would feel comforted knowing that their voices had been heard. The human representative took one last look at the tower behind them. Inside, the promised sphere remained glowing softly at the center of the council platform, a gentle reminder of what had brought them there. Part 4 ended not with confrontation, but with cooperation and understanding. setting the stage for the next steps humanity and the galaxy would take together. When the Terran delegation entered the Great Hall, everyone inside felt the air change. The room was normally filled with calm discussions and soft voices, but today, every being in the chamber went silent the moment the humans stepped in. They moved together, steady and focused, almost like they were all breathing in the same rhythm. Their quiet footsteps echoed strangely loud across the wide floor. At the front of the group walked Commander Moretti. She carried a sealed container, smooth and silver, the type used for official evidence. Nothing about it looked threatening, but the way she held it made every representative there sit up straighter. It was clear she was not there for small talk. She was there because something serious had happened, something that needed to be addressed without delay. The council members had expected angry words, maybe a heated argument, maybe even shouting. They did not expect what the humans were actually about to reveal. Even the council chair, an old and experienced figure who had seen many tense moments, felt unsure. His long fingers tapped nervously against the arm of his seat. The humans stopped at the center of the hall. Commander Moretti did not rush. She looked around slowly, making eye contact with several representatives. Some looked away immediately. Others stared, trying to read her face. But she gave nothing away. Finally, she placed the silver container on the raised platform in front of the council. The quiet hum of the hall grew even quieter, as if everyone was holding their breath. When she opened the lid, there were no dramatic sounds, no flashes of light, just a soft click. Inside was the one thing the council had hoped they would not see. It was unmistakably the identification crest of the officer responsible for the incident with the human child. The crest was an official symbol from the alien officer's uniform, marked with the officer's service number and history. It was placed there with precision and respect, without any damage or decoration. It was not a threat. It was a message. A few gasps were heard, but nothing too loud. Most representatives simply froze in place, unable to decide whether they should speak or stay silent. The crest, placed openly in the container, told them that the humans had taken action on their own terms. It was undeniable proof that the officer would not be showing up for any council meeting or hearing. But humanity had not brought anything graphic or violent. They had only brought the crest clean, official, and symbolic. A sign that they had dealt with the situation quietly, without creating a public spectacle. It was a strong message, but not one meant to frighten children or inspire fear-based stories. It was simply a demonstration of how seriously humanity treated harm against their young. Commander Moretti finally spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and almost gentle, yet it carried enough weight to fill every corner of the hall. She did not shout, and she did not threaten. She spoke as someone who had been forced to take action because the proper system had failed. She explained that the child, who had been harmed, was recovering. But the emotional impact on the family and on the human population was deep. She described how humans, despite their calm appearance today, felt the injury of their child like a wound shared by millions. They were a species that valued responsibility, and they did not allow harm toward children to be brushed aside with excuses. Then she displayed a series of documents. Not dramatic videos or frightening images, just records and reports. They were simple and clear. They showed that the alien officer had a long history of complaints filed by citizens from several planets. Many of these complaints had been ignored, delayed, or dismissed by the officer's superiors. The system that was supposed to protect innocent beings had failed many times, and the incident with the human child was only the latest proof. Some representatives looked shocked, because they had believed the officer was simply overworked or misunderstood. Others avoided eye contact, knowing very well that these issues had been buried for years. A few representatives even whispered quietly to each other, finally realizing the humans had uncovered information that the council itself had not taken seriously. Commander Moretti continued speaking, steady and unwavering. She explained that the humans had not come to brag or to scare anyone. They had come to make sure nothing like this ever happened again, not to their children, and not to the children of any species. She reminded the council that the galaxy was supposed to be united by shared values, not divided by fear or inequality. Almost everyone in the hall listened without interruption. Even those who usually debated endlessly kept their thoughts to themselves. The humans were known for their strong emotions and fierce loyalty, but today they spoke with a level of discipline that left a deep impression on everyone present. The ultimatum, when she finally stated it, was surprisingly calm and simple. Humanity asked for stronger child protection laws across all member worlds, mandatory training for officers, and transparent investigations whenever any child was harmed, regardless of species. They also requested a shared database of officer records, so no one could hide past misconduct anymore. There were no threats attached to the ultimatum, no angry warnings. Just a clear message that if the council refused to act, humanity would take independent measures to ensure the safety of their people. It was said in a measured tone, not as aggression, but as responsibility. The council members exchanged looks, some worried, some thoughtful. For years, they had debated minor issues endlessly. Yet here were the humans, asking for something deeply important and universal. Even representatives from worlds that usually stayed quiet began to speak up. Many admitted that their own citizens had felt unsafe at times due to similar incidents in their regions. Others shared concerns that officer authority had grown too unchecked in certain sectors. Slowly, the room shifted. The conversation became less about humans and more about all children across the galaxy. The humans had not just brought a complaint, they had brought a chance for reform. And the more everyone listened, the more they realized how necessary those reforms were. The council chair, who had been silent all this time, finally leaned forward. His voice was old but strong, and he spoke in a way that carried decades of experience. He acknowledged that the failure was not just the fault of one officer or one species. It was a failure of the entire system, a system that had grown comfortable and careless. He thanked the humans for bringing the issue forward so clearly and for handling it without causing chaos or fear. After a long discussion, the council agreed to put all human requests to an immediate vote. It was rare for the council to act with such speed, but the moment demanded seriousness. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy cast their votes. No one dared vote against reforms that protected children, not after seeing how deeply humans cared and how many other species quietly agreed. The results were unanimous. Every protection law proposed by the humans passed. New regulations were put into motion. New oversight groups were formed. And for the first time, every species felt they were truly working towards something meaningful together. Commander Moretti gave a small nod of triumph, but of relief. She did not celebrate. She simply gathered her team and prepared to leave. The humans had delivered their message, and the council had listened. That was enough. As the humans walked out of the hall, the other representatives watched them with a new kind of respect. Not fear, not tension, just respect. They finally understood something important. When humans fought for something, they fought for everyone, not just themselves. And from that day onward, the galaxy knew that the safety of children of every species was not something to debate. It was something to protect with absolute seriousness. After the meeting ended and the humans left the council hall, the long echo of their footsteps stayed in the minds of everyone who had watched them walk out. The room slowly emptied, yet the feeling remained. Something important had changed, and everyone could sense it. The council members returned to their private rooms, carrying the weight of what they had heard. Even the usually relaxed representatives sat quietly, lost in thought. It felt like the galaxy had been shaken awake in a gentle but firm way. Back on Earth's capital station, the Terran delegation finally allowed themselves to breathe more freely. They had spent weeks preparing, worrying, and trying to make sure they handled the situation without causing fear or conflict. Now that the reforms were accepted, the pressure on their shoulders began to ease. The humans were not celebrating loudly. Instead, they shared calm smiles, relieved that their message had been understood without the need for angry arguments or dramatic scenes. Commander Moretti stood by a wide window, looking out at the stars. She watched the glow of distant planets and ships drifting in clean, organized lines. She had seen the galaxy at its worst and at its best, and today felt like one of the rare days when something truly good had taken place. She knew that the work wasn't finished. There were meetings to attend, laws to finalize, and committees to form, but the hardest moment was behind them. Meanwhile, far away from the political centers, the family of the little girl was slowly trying to return to normal life. The child had gone home from the medical station a few days earlier. She still felt a bit nervous around strangers, especially those who looked different from humans, but she was healing day by day. Her parents spoke gently with her, trying to help her feel safe again. They didn't mention anything about the council or what the humans had done. They wanted her to feel like a normal child, not someone at the center of a galaxy-wide issue. One evening, as she sat on her favorite seat near the window, she watched the birds outside and asked her mother why so many people had been visiting lately. Her mother smiled softly and told her that many kind-hearted beings from different species had sent messages of support. They didn't want her to be scared. They wanted her to know she was not alone. The little girl nodded, still not fully understanding. But the warmth in her mother's voice made her feel calmer. Across the galaxy, a quiet ripple of change began to spread. News networks, talk shows, and community groups everywhere were discussing the new child protection reforms. Teachers, parents, guardians, and even students were talking about how important it was to create safe environments for all young ones, no matter which species they belonged to. Many shared stories of times when they had felt overlooked or dismissed, and now they finally felt like someone had listened. On some planets, small groups held peaceful gatherings to support the new policies. They made banners, drew pictures of children from many species holding hands, and spoke about unity. The events were calm and hopeful, and even the council chair attended one of them on a quiet planet known for its forests and calm rivers. He stood with the visitors, listened to their worries, and promised that the reforms would be implemented in full. Back in the council hall, committees worked tirelessly to turn the promises into real action. Representatives from different species sat together, learning about each other's cultures and trying to understand what children needed in different environments. Some species had unique needs like special protective gear for extreme climates or calming techniques for children who sensed emotions more strongly than humans. The discussions were long, but they were full of cooperation. It felt like different worlds were finally learning to understand each other, instead of just negotiating for benefits. One major change was the creation of the Interstellar Child Safety Network. This network allowed officers, teachers, and guardians across the galaxy to report concerns instantly. Every report was reviewed by a group of trained experts, and no complaint could be ignored anymore. Many representatives were surprised by how many cases had gone unnoticed in the past. Now, each one would receive careful attention. Human engineers also helped develop new training programs for officers. They created simulations that taught communication skills, empathy, and calm conflict resolution. Officers from dozens of species signed up for the training voluntarily, wanting to improve their service. Some said they were inspired by how calmly the humans had handled such a serious situation. The galaxy slowly began to feel safer and more connected. For the first time in a long time, people weren't just talking about trade or politics. They were talking about kindness, protection, and responsibility. Back on Earth's capital station, Commander Moretti received a message from the council chair. He thanked her for delivering the concerns so respectfully and for not letting the situation turn into fear or anger. He also informed her that the new laws were already being put into practice in several regions. Some sectors had already begun improving local schools and community centers. They wanted to show that they were fully committed. Commander Moretti felt a quiet satisfaction reading the message. She had always believed that humans could influence the galaxy in a positive way if they used their strength responsibly. This incident proved that they could stand firm without becoming aggressive. They could be strong without being frightening. She shared the message with her team, and they took a moment to appreciate what they had accomplished. It wasn't a victory celebrated with cheers or fireworks. It was a victory of peace, cooperation, and understanding. As weeks passed, the effect of the reforms became visible in everyday life. Families across the galaxy felt more comfortable letting their children explore public spaces. Schools welcomed new students from different planets. Officers began greeting children with a softer tone. And council members spoke more openly about fairness and safety in their meetings. Even representatives who had once disagreed with humanity's approach admitted that the reforms were beneficial. They saw that when one species fought for the protection of children, it inspired others to do the same. One quiet afternoon, the little girl's family decided to take her on a short trip to a nearby garden world. It was a warm, bright place with gentle winds and colorful flowers. She walked slowly at first, holding her parents' hands, but soon she began to run along the soft paths, laughing as she chased glowing insects. Her parents watched her with mixed emotions: relief, joy, and a small sense of worry, but they were grateful to see her smile freely again. As she played, a group of friendly travelers from another species approached her carefully. They kept a respectful distance,